With every single scroll, every stream, and every share, there's this huge question just hanging in the air. When it comes to the media we consume, who's really in control? Is it them, shaping our thoughts, or is it us, calling all the shots? Well, let's dive in and try to figure this out together.
For the longest time, the big fear was that media messages were like magic bullets, fired directly into our brains to instantly change our opinions. But the truth about how media influences us, it's way more subtle, and honestly, a whole lot more interesting than that.
Because media influence, it almost never travels in a straight line. It's much more like a social ricochet, bouncing from person to person, changing shape a little bit with every single interaction. See, the early theories totally missed the most powerful filter of all, our own friends and family.
I mean, think about it for a second. When you see a big news story, do you just accept it word for word? Probably not, right? You talk about it with your friends, you might see a meme about it, you hear someone else's take on it. Every one of those steps reinterprets and even changes that original message. It's basically a giant game of social telephone, and it's happening constantly.
So this whole process was actually mapped out way back in 1955 with a model they called the two-step flow. It's pretty simple, really. Step 1, the media sends out a message. But here's the twist. Instead of hitting everyone at once, Step 2 shows it first reaching these key people. Researchers called them opinion formers. Today, we'd call them an influencer, a YouTuber, a trusted journalist, or maybe just that one friend whose opinion you always trust. Then, in Step 3, they interpret it and pass it on, before it finally spreads to their wider social network in Step 4.
So the big takeaway here is that the media's power is often indirect. It's filtered through the people we know and trust. The discussions we have in our group chats or over dinner can actually be way more influential than the original TV broadcast or article itself. The real influence comes from the conversation, not just the content.
Okay, but what if we flip this entire idea completely on its head? What if the media isn't really influencing us much at all? What if, and stick with me here, we're the ones in control? This leads us to a totally different way of looking at our relationship with media.
This chart shows the contrast perfectly. On the left, you've got the old assumption. The media is all-powerful, and the audience is just a passive sponge, soaking it all up. But the uses and gratifications theory on the right, it argues the complete opposite, that the media is actually pretty weak, and the audience is strong and, most importantly, active. We aren't being used by the media, we are using it.
This model says that we are active consumers, and we have specific goals in mind. We don't just randomly stumble upon content. We actively seek it out. We pick and choose what we watch, what we read, and what we listen to, all to satisfy some kind of need, whether we're totally conscious of it or not.
Let's make this super personal. Why are you here watching this right now? Are you trying to learn something new, maybe for a class or just because you're curious? Are you just taking a quick break from work and need a diversion? Or maybe you just like the feeling of diving deep into a new topic. Whatever the reason, you chose to be here, to gratify a need.
Now, researchers have kind of boiled our motivations down to these 4 main types. Entertainment is the obvious one, just zoning out to a movie. Social solidarity, that's all about connection, binging that new hit show so you can jump into the conversation online. Identity is about expressing who we are through the music we share or the creators we follow. And surveillance is simply our need to stay informed, scrolling the news feeds to see what's going on in the world.
All right, so we've got these 2 very different views. One where media controls us indirectly, and one where we control the media. But there's a third idea, and it's arguably the most powerful of all, because it kind of merges the 2. It suggests that media's influence is very, very real, but it's not some quick shock to the system. No, it's a slow burn that shapes our entire culture over time.
This is called the cultural effects model, and it argues that the real power of media isn't in one single message, but in the slow, cumulative drip, drip, drip of thousands of messages over years and years. This isn't about changing your vote tomorrow. This is about shaping the basic assumptions you have about the world, often so subtly you don't even realize it's happening.
And this, right here, is the critical distinction. This model isn't about direct persuasion. It's about setting the agenda. By constantly showing us certain types of people, certain lifestyles, and certain problems, while totally ignoring others, the media literally builds the world that we then form our opinions inside of. It draws the map, and we just decide which roads to take on that map.
So how does this slow burn actually work its magic? Well, it's all about consistency and repetition. The media consistently promotes certain values, things like consumerism or maybe individualism. It can sideline dissenting views just by not giving them any airtime, which makes them seem fringe or unimportant. And by repeating certain ideas over and over and over again, like, say, crime is always rising, those ideas eventually become taken for granted facts, whether they're actually true or not.
One of the key thinkers in this field, George Gerbner, put it perfectly. He said, "The continual repetition of patterns serve to define the world and legitimize the social order." In other words, the patterns we see on screen don't just entertain us, they define what's normal and make the way society is structured seem totally natural and just the way things are.
So, which theory is the right one? The social ricochet? The active audience? The cultural slow burn? Well, the reason this whole debate is still going on is because finding a simple, clean answer is, well, it's pretty much impossible. The media landscape is just way too complex.
I mean, researchers face these enormous challenges. Just look at these questions. First off, what even is the media anymore? A newspaper, a TikTok video, a video game? They're all so different. And how do you even define an effect? Is it a change in someone's behavior or just a tiny shift in their attitude? It's incredibly hard to separate media's influence from all the other things going on in our lives, especially over the long run.
And here's probably the biggest complication of all today. On social media, we are both the audience and the creators. We consume content, but we also produce it and we distribute it. This just completely blurs the lines that those older theories relied on, making the flow of influence this tangled, messy web, not a simple straight line.
Which brings us all the way back to our first question, but now, hopefully with a much deeper understanding. Is the media a clear window, just showing us the world as it really is? Or is it the invisible hand that's shaping the very lens through which we see everything? I think the only real answer comes from looking critically at the media you consume every single day. Thanks for tuning in.